Chapter 34, Connor. Like Risa, Connor finds his niche by accident. Connor never considered himself mechanically capable, but there are a few things he can stand less than a bunch of morons standing around looking at something that doesn't work and wondering who's going to fix it. During that first week, while Risa's off learning how to be an exceptionally good fake doctor, Connor decides to figure out the workings of a fried air conditioning unit, then find replacement parts from one of the junk piles and get it working again. He soon comes to realize it's the same way with every other broken thing he comes across. Sure, it began with trial and error, but the errors become fewer and fewer as the days go by. There are plenty of older kids who claim to be mechanics and are really good at explaining why things won't work. Connor, on the other hand, actually fixes them. It quickly gets him reassigned from trash duty to the repair crew, and since there are endless things to repair, it keeps his mind off of other things, such as how little he gets to see Risa and the Admiral's tightly structured world, and how quickly Roland is advancing through the social ranks of the place. Roland has managed to get himself one of the best assignments in the graveyard. By working the angles and applying plenty of flattery, he's been taken on as the pilot's assistant. Mostly he just keeps the helicopter cleaned and fueled, but the assignment reeks of an apprenticeship. "He's teaching me how to fly it," he overhears Roland tell a bunch of other kids one day. Connor shudders to think of Roland behind the controls of a helicopter, but many kids are impressed by Roland. His age gives him seniority, and his manipulations gain him either fear or respect from a surprising number of others. Roland draws his negative energy from the kids around him, and there are a lot of kids here for him to draw from. Social manipulation is not one of Connor's strengths. Even among his own team, he's a bit of a mystery. Kids know not to tread on him because he has a low tolerance for irritation and idiocy, but there's no one they'd rather have on their side than Connor. "People like you because you've got integrity," Hayden tells him, "even when you're being an ass." Connor has to laugh at that. Him? Integrity? There have been plenty of people in Connor's life who would think differently. But on the other hand, he's changing. He's been getting into fewer fights. Maybe it's because there's more room to breathe here than in the warehouse. Or maybe he's been working out his brain enough to successfully muscle his impulses into line. A lot of that has to do with Risa, because every time he forces himself to think before acting, it's her voice in his head telling him to slow down. He wants to tell her, but she's always so busy in the medical jet, and you don't just go to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm a better person because you're in my head." She's also still in Roland's head, and that worries Connor. At first, Risa had been a tool to provoke Connor into a fight, but now Roland sees her as a prize. Now, instead of using brute strength against her, he tries to charm her at every turn. "You're not actually falling for him, are you?" he asks her one day, on one of the rare occasions he can get her alone. "I'll pretend you didn't just ask that," she tells him in disgust. But Connor has reasons to wonder. "On that first night here, he offered you his blanket and you accepted it," he points out. "Only because I knew it would make him cold." "And when he offers you his food, you take it." "Because it means he goes hungry." It's coolly logical. Connor finds it amazing that she can put her emotions aside and be as calculating as Roland, beating him at his own game. Another reason for Connor to admire her. "Work call!" It happens about once a week beneath the meeting canopy, the only structure in the entire graveyard that isn't part of a plane, and the only place large enough to gather all 423 kids. Work call. A chance to get out into the real world. A chance to have a life. Sort of. The Admiral never attends, but there are video feeds from the meeting canopy just as there are feeds all over the yard, so everyone knows he's watching. Whether or not every camera is constantly monitored, no one knows, but the potential for being seen is always there. Connor did not care for the Admiral the first day he met him. The sight of all those video cameras shortly thereafter made Connor like him even less. It seems each day there's something to add to his general feeling of disgust with the man. Amp leads the work call meeting with his megaphone and clipboard. "A man in Oregon needs a team of 5 to clear-cut a few acres of forest," Amp announces. "You'll be given room and board and taught to use the tools of the trade. The job should take a few months, and at the end you'll get new identities. 18-year-old identities." Amp doesn't let them know the salary because there is none. The Admiral gets paid, though. He gets paid a purchase price. "Any takers?" There are always takers. Sure enough, more than a dozen hands go up, 16-year-olds mostly. 17s are too close to 18 to make it worth their while, and younger kids are too intimidated by the prospect. "Report to the Admiral after this meeting. He'll make the final decision as to who goes." Work call infuriates Connor. He never puts his hand up, even if it's something he might actually want to do. "The Admiral's using us," he says to the kids around him. "Don't you see that?" Most of the kids just shrug, but Hayden's there and he never misses an opportunity to add his peculiar wisdom to a situation. "I'd rather be used whole than in pieces," Hayden says. Amp looks at his clipboard and holds up the megaphone again. "House cleaning services," he says. 3 are needed, female preferred. No false IDs, but the location is secure and remote, which means you'll be safe from the juvie cops until you turn 18. Connor won't even look. Please tell me no one raised their hand. "About 6 girls, all 17 years old, it looks like," says Hayden. "I guess no one wants to be a house girl for more than a year." "This place isn't a refuge, it's a slave market. Why doesn't anyone see that?" "Who says they don't see it? It's just that unwinding makes slavery look good. It's always the lesser of 2 evils." "I don't see why there have to be any evils at all." As the meeting breaks up, Connor feels a hand on his shoulder. He thinks it must be a friend, but it's not. It's Roland. It's such a surprise it takes Connor a moment before he reacts. He shakes Roland's hand off. "Something you want?" "Just to talk." "Don't you have a helicopter to wash?" Roland smiles at that. "Less washing, more flying. Cleaver made me his unofficial co-pilot." Cleaver must have a death wish. Connor doesn't know who he's more disgusted with, Roland or the pilot for being suckered in by him. Roland looks around at the thinning crowd. "The Admiral's got some racket going on here, doesn't he?" he says. "Most of the losers here don't care, but it bothers you, doesn't it?" "Your point?" "Just that you're not the only one who thinks the Admiral needs some retraining." Connor doesn't like where this is going. "What I think of the Admiral is my business." "Of course it is. Have you seen his teeth, by the way?" "What about them?" "Pretty obvious that they're not his. I hear he keeps a picture of the kid he got them from in his office. An unwind like us who, thanks to him, never made it to 18. Makes you wonder how much more of him comes from us. Makes you wonder if there's anything left of the original Admiral at all." This is too much information to process here and now, and considering the source, Connor doesn't want to process it at all. But he knows he will. "Roland, let me make this as clear to you as I can. I don't trust you. I don't like you. I don't want to have anything to do with you." "I can't stand you either," Roland says, then he points to the Admiral's jet. "But right now, we've got the same enemy." Roland strolls off before anyone else can take notice of their conversation, leaving Connor with a heaviness in his stomach. The very idea that he and Roland could in any way be on the same side makes him feel like he swallowed something rancid. For a week, the seed that Roland planted in Connor's brain grows. It's fertile ground because Connor already distrusted the Admiral. Now every time he sees the man, Connor notices something. His teeth are perfect. They're not the teeth of an aging war veteran. The way he looks at people, looking into their eyes, it's as if he were sizing those eyes up, looking for a pair that might suit him. And those kids that disappear on work calls, since they never come back, who's to know where they really go? Who's to say they don't all get sent off to be unwound? The Admiral says his goal is to save unwinds, but what if he's got an entirely different agenda? These thoughts keep Connor awake at night, but he won't share them with anyone because once he does, it aligns him with Roland, and that's an alliance he never wants to make. During their 4th week in the graveyard, while Connor is still building his case against the Admiral in his own mind, a plane arrives. It's the first one since the old FedEx jet that brought them here, and like that jet, this one is packed full of live cargo. While the 5 Goldens march the new arrivals from their jet, Connor works on a faulty generator. He watches them with mild interest as they pass, wondering if any of them would be more mechanically skilled than him and bump him into a less enviable position. Then, toward the back of the line of kids, is a face he thinks he recognizes. Someone from home? No, someone else. All at once it comes to him who this is. It's the boy he was sure had been unwound weeks ago. It's the kid he kidnapped for his own good. It's Lev. Connor drops his wrench and runs toward him, but gains control before he gets there, burying his mixed flood of feelings beneath a calm saunter. This is the kid who betrayed him. This is the kid he once swore he'd never forgive, and yet the thought of him unwound had been too much to bear. But Lev hasn't been unwound. He's right here, marching off to the supply jet. Connor is thrilled. Connor is furious. Lev doesn't see him yet, and that's fine because it gives Connor some time to take in what he sees. This is no longer the clean-cut tithe he pulled out of his parents' car more than 2 months before. This kid has long, unkempt hair and a hardened look about him. This kid isn't in tithing whites, but wears torn jeans and a dirty red t-shirt. Connor wants to let him pass just so he can have time to process this new image, but Lev sees him and gives him a grin right away. This is also different, because during that brief time they knew each other, Lev had never been pleased by Connor's presence. Lev steps toward him. "Stay in line," orders Amp. "The supply jet's this way." But Connor waves Amp off. "It's okay, I know this one." Amp reluctantly gives in. Make sure he gets to the supply jet. Then he returns to herding the others. "So, how are things?" says Lev. Just like that. How are things? You'd think they were buds back from summer vacation. Connor knows what he has to do. It's the only thing that will ever make things right between him and Lev. Once again, it's instinctive action without time for thought. Instinctive, not irrational. Impassioned, but not impulsive. Connor has come to know the difference. He hauls off and punches Lev in the eye. Not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to snap his head halfway around and give him a nasty shiner. Before Lev can react, Connor says, "That's for what you did to us." Then, before Lev can respond, he does something else, sudden and unexpected. He pulls Lev toward him and hugs him tightly, the way he hugged his own little brother last year when he took first place in the district pentathlon. "I'm really, really glad you're alive, Lev." "Yeah, me too." He lets Lev go before it starts feeling awkward, and when he does, he can see Lev's eyes already beginning to swell. And an idea occurs to him. "Come on, I'll take you over to the medical jet. I know someone who will take care of that eye." It isn't until later that night that Connor gets an inkling of how much Lev has truly changed. Connor is shaken awake sometime during the night. He opens his eyes to a flashlight shining in his face, so close the light burns. "Hey, what is this?" "Shh," says a voice behind the flashlight. It's Lev. Lev should have been in the newcomer's jet. That's where all the kids go until they get sorted into their teams. There are strict orders that no one is to be let out at night. Apparently Lev is no longer a boy bound by rules. "What are you doing here?" Connor says. "Do you know the trouble you could be in?" He still can't see Lev's face behind that flashlight. "You hit me this afternoon," says Lev. "I hit you because I owed that to you." "I know. I deserved it, and so it's okay," says Lev. "But don't you ever hit me again, or you'll regret it." Although Connor has no intention of ever punching Lev out again, he does not respond well to ultimatums. "I'll hit you," says Connor, "if you deserve it." Silence from behind the flashlight. Then Lev says, "Fair enough, but you better make sure that I do." The light goes off. Lev leaves, but Connor can't sleep. Every Unwind has a story you don't want to know. He supposes that Lev now has his. The Admiral calls for Connor 2 days later. Apparently he has something in need of repair. His residence is an old 747 that was used as Air Force One years before any of the kids here were born. The engines had been removed and the presidential seal painted over, but you could still see a shadow of the emblem beneath the paint. Connor climbs the stairs with a bag of tools, hoping that whatever it is, he can get in and out quickly. Like everyone else, he has a morbid curiosity about the man, and he wonders what an old presidential jet looks like on the inside. But being under the Admiral's scrutiny scares the heck out of him. He steps through the hatch to find a couple of kids tidying up. They're younger kids that Connor doesn't know. He thought the Goldens might be in here, but they're nowhere to be seen. As for the jet, it's not nearly as luxurious as Connor had expected. The leather seats have tears, the carpet is almost worn through. It looks more like an old motorhome than Air Force One. "Where's the Admiral?" The Admiral steps out from the deeper recesses of the jet. Although Connor's eyes are still adjusting to the light, he can see the Admiral is holding a weapon. "Connor, I'm glad you could make it." Connor winces at the sight of the gun, and at the realization the Admiral knows him by name. "What do you need that for?" Connor asks, pointing at the gun. "Just cleaning it," says the Admiral. Connor wonders why he would still have a clip and a gun he was cleaning, but decides it's best not to ask. The Admiral puts the gun into a drawer and locks it. Then he sends the 2 kids off and seals the hatch behind them. This is exactly the kind of situation Connor feared most, and he can feel a rush of adrenaline begin to tingle in his fingers and toes. His awareness becomes heightened. "You need me to fix something, sir?" "Yes, I do. My coffee maker." "Why don't you just take one from the other planes?" "Because," says the Admiral calmly, "I prefer to have this one repaired." He leads Connor through the jet, which seems even larger on the inside than out, filled with cabins, conference rooms, and studies. "You know, your name comes up quite often," the Admiral says. This is news to him, and not welcome news either. "Why?" "First, for the things you repair, then for the fighting." Connor senses a reprimand on the way. Yes, he's had fewer fights here than usual, but the Admiral is a man of zero tolerance. Sorry about the fighting. Don't be. Oh, there's no question that you're a loose cannon, but more often than not, you're aimed in the right direction. I don't know what you mean, sir. From what I can see, each fight you've engaged in has resolved one problem or another, even the fights you lose. So even then, you're fixing things. He offers Connor that white-toothed smile. Connor shudders. He tries to hide it, but he's sure the Admiral sees it. They come to a small dining room and galley. Here we are, says the Admiral. The old coffee maker sits on a counter. It's a simple device. Connor's about to pull out a screwdriver to open up the back when he notices that it's not plugged in. When he plugs it in, the light comes on and it starts to gurgle out coffee into the little glass pot. Well, how about that, says the Admiral with another of his terrible grins. I'm not here for the coffee maker, am I? Have a seat, the Admiral says. I'd rather not. Have one anyway. That's when Connor sees the picture. There are several photos up on the wall, but the one that captures Connor's attention is of a smiling kid about his age. The smile looks familiar. In fact, it looks exactly like the Admiral's smile. It's just like Roland had said. Now Connor wants to bolt, but Reese's voice is in his head again, telling him to scan his options. Sure, he can run. Chances are he can get to the hatch before the Admiral can stop him, but opening the hatch won't be easy. He could hit the Admiral with one of his tools. That might give him enough time to get away. But where would he go? Beyond the graveyard, there's just desert, desert, and more desert. In the end, he realizes his best choice is to do as the Admiral says. He sits down. You don't like me, do you? Says the Admiral. Connor won't meet his gaze. You saved my life by bringing me here. You will not avoid answering this question. You don't like me, do you? Connor shudders once more, and this time doesn't even try to hide it. No, sir, I don't. I want to know your reasons. Connor lets out a single rueful chuckle as his answer. You think I'm a slave dealer, says the Admiral, and that I'm using these unwinds for my own profit? If you know what I'm going to say, why ask me? I want you to look at me. But Connor doesn't want to see the man's eyes, or more accurately, doesn't want the Admiral seeing his. I said look at me. Reluctantly, Connor lifts his eyes and fixes them on the Admiral's. I'm looking. I believe you are a smart kid. Now I want you to think. Think! I am a decorated Admiral of the United States Navy. Do you think I need to be selling children to earn money? I don't know. Think! Do I care about money and lavish things? I do not live in a mansion. I do not vacation on a tropical island. I spend my time in the stinking desert living in a rotting plane 365 days a year. Why do you think that is? I don't know. I think you do. Connor stands up now. In spite of the Admiral's tone of voice, he feels less and less intimidated by him. Whether it's wise or whether it's foolhardy, Connor decides to give the Admiral what he's asking for. You do it because of the power. You do it because it lets you keep hundreds of helpless kids in the palm of your hand. And you do it because you can pick and choose who gets unwound, and which parts you'll get. The Admiral is caught off guard by this. Suddenly he's on the defensive. What did you say? It's obvious. All the scars and those teeth, they're not the ones you were born with, are they? So what is it you want from me? Is it my eyes or my ears? Or maybe it's my hands that can fix things so well. Is that why I'm here? Is it? The Admiral's voice is a predatory growl. You've gone too far. No, you've gone too far. The fury in the Admiral's eyes should terrify Connor, but his cannon has come loose and it's beyond locking down. We come to you in desperation. What you do to us is obscene. So I'm a monster then? Yes. And my teeth are the proof. Yes. Then you can have them. And then the Admiral does something beyond imagining. He reaches into his mouth, grabs onto his own jaw, and rips the teeth out of his mouth. His eyes blazing at Connor, he hurls the hard pink cup in his hand down on the table, where it clatters in two horrible pieces. Connor screams in shock. It's all there. 2 rows of white teeth, 2 sets of pink gums. But there's no blood. Why is there no blood? There's no blood in the Admiral's mouth either. His face seems to have collapsed onto itself. His mouth is just a floppy, puckered hole. Connor doesn't know which is worse, the Admiral's face or the bloodless teeth. They're called dentures, the Admiral says. They used to be common in the days before unwinding. But who wants false teeth when for half the price you can get real ones straight from a healthy unwind? I had to get these made in Thailand. No one does it here anymore. I don't understand. Connor looks at the false teeth and jerks his head almost involuntarily toward the picture of the smiling boy. The Admiral follows his gaze. That, says the Admiral, was my son. His teeth looked very much like my own at that age, so they designed my dentures using his dental records. It's a relief to hear an explanation other than the one Roland gave. I'm sorry. The Admiral neither accepts nor rejects Connor's apology. The money I get for placing unwinds into service positions is used to feed the ones who remain, and to pay for the safe houses and warehouses that get runaway unwinds off the street. It pays for the aircraft that get them here, and pays off anyone who needs bribery to look the other way. After that, the money that remains goes into the pockets of each unwind on the day they turn 18 and are sent out into this unforgiving world. So you see, I may still be, by your definition of the word, a slave dealer. But I am not quite the monster you think I am. Connor looks to the dentures that still sit there, glistening on the table. He thinks to grab them and hand them back to the Admiral as a peace offering, but decides the prospect is simply too disgusting. He lets the Admiral do it himself. Do you believe the things I've told you today? The Admiral asks. Connor considers it, but finds his compass is out of whack. Truth and rumors, facts and lies are all spinning in his head so wildly he can't say what is what. I think so, says Connor. No, so, says the Admiral, because you will see things today more awful than an old man's false teeth. I need to know that my trust in you is not misplaced. Half a mile away in aisle 14, space 32, sits a FedEx jet that has not moved since it was towed here more than a month ago. The Admiral has Connor drive him to the jet in his golf cart, but not before retrieving the pistol from his cabinet as a precaution. Beneath the starboard wing of the FedEx jet are 5 mounds of dirt marked by crude headstones. These are the 5 who suffocated in transit. Their presence here makes this truly a graveyard. The hatch to the hold is open. Once they've stopped, the Admiral says, "Climb inside and find crate number 2933. Then come out again, and we'll talk." You're not coming? I've already been. The Admiral hands him a flashlight. You'll need this. Connor stands on the roof of the cart, climbs through the cargo hatch, and turns on the flashlight. The moment he does, he has a shiver of memory. It looks exactly the same as it did a month ago. Open crates and overtones of urine. The afterbirth of their arrival. He works his way deeper into the jet, passing the crate that he, Hayden, Imby, and Diego had occupied. Finally, he finds number 2933. It was one of the first crates to be loaded. Its hatch is open just a crack. Connor pulls it all the way open and shines his light in. When he catches sight of what's inside, he screams and reflexively lurches back, banging his head on the crate behind him. The Admiral could have warned him, but he hadn't. Okay. I know what I saw. There's nothing I can do about it, and nothing in there can hurt me. Still, he takes time to prepare himself before he looks in again. There are 5 dead kids in the crate, all 17-year-olds. There's Amp and Jeeves. Beside them are Kevin, Melinda, and Raoul, the 3 kids who gave out jobs his first day there. All 5 of the Goldens. There are no signs of blood, no wounds. They could all be asleep except for the fact that Amp's eyes are open and staring at nothing. Connor's mind reels. Did the Admiral do this? Is he mad after all? But why would he? No, it has to have been someone else. When Connor comes out into the light, the Admiral is paying his respects to the 5 kids already buried beneath the wing. He straightens the markers and evens out the mounds. They disappeared last night. I found them sealed in the crate this morning, the Admiral tells him. They suffocated, just like the first 5 did. It's the same crate. Who would do this? Who indeed, says the Admiral. Satisfied with the graves, he turns to Connor. Whoever it is took out the 5 most powerful kids, which means whoever did this wants to systematically dismantle the power structure here so that they can rise to the top of it more quickly. There's only one Unwind Connor knows of who might be capable of this, but even so, he has a hard time believing Roland would do something this horrible. I was meant to discover them, the Admiral says. They left my golf cart here this morning so that I would. Make no mistake about it, Connor, this is an act of war. They have made a surgical strike. These 5 were my eyes and ears among the kids here. Now I have none. The Admiral takes a moment to look at the dark hole of the hold. Tonight, you and I will come back here to bury them. Connor swallows hard at the prospect. He wonders who he pissed off in heaven to get singled out to be the Admiral's new lieutenant. We'll bury them far away, says the Admiral, and we will tell no one that they're dead, because if word of it gets out, the culprits will have their first victory. If someone does start talking, and they will, we'll track the rumors down to the guilty party. And then what? Connor asks. And then justice will be served. Until then, this must be our secret. As Connor chauffeurs him back to his plane, the Admiral makes his business with Connor clear. I need a new set of eyes and ears, someone to keep me abreast of the state of things among the Unwinds, and someone to ferret out the wolf in the herd. I'm asking you to do this for me. So you want me to be a spy? Whose side are you on? Are you on my side, or the side of whoever did this? Connor now knows why the Admiral brought him here and forced him to see this for himself. It's one thing to be told, and another one entirely to discover the bodies. It makes it brutally clear to Connor where his allegiance must lie. Why me? Connor has to ask. The Admiral gives him his white-dentured smile. Because you, my friend, are the least of all evils. The next morning, the Admiral makes an announcement that the Goldens were sent off to organize new safe houses. Connor watches Roland for a reaction, perhaps a grin or a glance at one of his buddies. But there's nothing. Roland gives no telltale sign he knows what really happened to them. In fact, throughout the morning announcements, he seems disinterested and distracted, like he can't wait to get on with his day. There's a good reason for that. Roland's apprenticeship with Cleaver, the helicopter pilot, has been paying off. Over the past weeks, Roland has learned to fly the helicopter like a pro, and when Cleaver isn't around, he offers free rides to those kids he feels deserve it. He says Cleaver doesn't care, but more likely, he just doesn't know. Connor had assumed that Roland would offer rides to his own inner circle of kids, but that's not the case. Roland rewards work well done, even by kids he doesn't know. He rewards loyalty to one's team. He lets other kids vote on who should get a chance to do a flyby of the yard in the helicopter. In short, Roland acts as if he's the one in charge, and not the Admiral. When the Admiral is present, he feigns obedience, but when others are gathered around him, and there are always others gathered around Roland, he takes every opportunity to cut the man down. The Admiral's out of touch, he would say. He doesn't know what it's like to be one of us. He can't possibly understand who we are and what we need. And in groups of kids he's already won over, he whispers his theories about the Admiral's teeth and his scars and his diabolical plans for all of them. He spreads fear and distrust, using it to unite as many kids as he can. Connor has to bite his lip to keep himself quiet when he hears Roland mouth off, because if he speaks out in defense of the Admiral, then Roland will know which side of the line he's on. There's a recreation jet at the graveyard near the meeting tent. Inside there are TVs and electronics, and under its wings are pool tables, a pinball machine, and reasonably comfortable furniture. Connor proposed setting up a water mister so that the area beneath the wings will stay at least a little bit cooler during the heat of the day. But even more importantly, Connor figures the project will allow him to be a fly on the wall, hearing conversations, cataloging clicks, and performing general espionage. The problem is, Connor is never a fly on the wall. Instead, his work becomes the center of attention. Kids offer to help him like he's Tom Sawyer painting a fence. They all keep seeing him as a leader when all he wants is to be ignored. He's glad that he never told anyone he's the so-called Akron AWOL. According to the current rumors, the Akron AWOL took on an entire legion of juvie cops, outsmarted the National Guard, and liberated half a dozen harvest camps. He has enough attention from other kids without having to contend with that kind of reputation. While Connor works to install the Mr. line, Roland keeps an eye on him from the pool table. He finally puts down the cue and comes over. "You're just a busy little worker bee, ain't ya?" Roland says, loud enough for all the kids around to hear. Connor's up on a stepladder attaching mist piping to the underside of the wing. It allows him the satisfaction of carrying on this conversation while looking down on Roland. "I'm just trying to make life a little easier," Connor says. "We need a mister down here. Wouldn't want anyone to suffocate in this heat." Roland keeps a cool poker face. "It looks like you're the Admiral's new golden boy now that the others have left." He looks around to make sure he has everyone's attention. "I've seen you go up to his jet." "He needs things fixed, so I fixed them," says Connor. "That's all." Then, before Roland can push his interrogation, Hayden speaks up from the pool table. "Connor's not the only one going up there," Hayden says. "There's kids going in and out all the time. Kids with food, kids cleaning, and I hear he's taken an interest in a certain mouth breather we all know and love." All eyes turn toward Emby, who has become a fixture at the pinball machine since he arrived. "What?" You've been up to the Admiral's, haven't you? Hayden says. Don't deny it. So? So, what does he want? I'm sure we'd all like to know. Imby squirms, uncomfortable at the center of anyone's attention. He just wanted to know about my family and stuff. This is news to Connor. Perhaps the Admiral's looking for someone else to help him ferret out the killer. True, Imby's much less visible than Connor, but a fly on the wall shouldn't actually be a fly on the wall. I know what it is, says Roland. He wants your hair. Does not. Yeah, his own hair is thinning, right? You got yourself a nice mop up there. The old man wants to scalp you and send the rest of you to be unwound. Shut up. Most of the kids laugh. Sure, it's a joke, but Connor wonders how many think Roland might be right. Imby must suspect it himself because he looks kind of sick. It makes Connor furious. That's right, pick on Imby, says Connor. Show everyone just how low you are. He climbs down off the ladder, facing Roland eye to eye. Hey, did you notice Amp left his megaphone? Why don't you take its place? You're such a loudmouth, you'd be perfect for it. Roland's response comes without the slightest smile. I wasn't asked. That night, Connor and the Admiral have a secret meeting in his quarters, drinking coffee made by a machine rumored to be broken. They speak of Roland and Connor's suspicions about him, but the Admiral is not satisfied. I don't want suspicion, I want proof. I don't want your feelings, I want evidence. The Admiral adds some whiskey from a flask to his own coffee. When Connor is done with his report, he gets up to leave, but the Admiral won't let him. He pours Connor a second cup of coffee, which will surely keep him up all night, but then he doubts he'll be sleeping well tonight anyway. Very few people know what I'm about to tell you, says the Admiral. So why tell me? Because it serves my purposes for you to know. It's an honest answer, but one that still keeps his motives hidden. Connor imagines he must have been very good in a war. When I was younger, begins the Admiral, I fought in the Heartland War. The scars you so impertinently assumed were transplant scars came from a grenade. Which side were you on? The Admiral gives Connor that scrutinizing look he's so good at. How much do you know about the Heartland War? Connor shrugs. It was the last chapter in our history textbook, but we had state testing, so we never got to it. The Admiral waves his hand in disgust. Textbooks sugar-coated anyway. No one wants to remember how it really was. You asked which side I was on. The truth is, there were 3 sides in the war, not 2. There was the Life Army, the Choice Brigade, and the remains of the American military whose job it was to keep the other 2 sides from killing each other. That's the side I was on. Unfortunately, we weren't very successful. You see, a conflict always begins with an issue, a difference of opinion, an argument. But by the time it turns into a war, the issue doesn't matter anymore because now it's about one thing and one thing only, how much each side hates the other. The Admiral pours a little more whiskey into his mug before he continues. There were dark days leading up to the war. Everything that we think defines right and wrong was being turned upside down. On one side, people were murdering abortion doctors to protect the right to life, while on the other side, people were getting pregnant just to sell their fetal tissue, and everyone was selecting their leaders not by their ability to lead, but by where they stood on this single issue. It was beyond madness. Then the military fractured, both sides got hold of weapons of war, and 2 opinions became 2 armies determined to destroy each other.